And after that, he ships off to the basic school, which is where all Marine officers go to. In OCS, you kind of get your military indoctrination, but the basic school is where you're actually learning to be a combat leader. This is interesting. At the basic school, the entire course in the winter of 1968 had been shortened from 9 months to 21 weeks, with about one Saturday free each month. The reason for the concentration of the course was obvious, if seldom talked about, as we toiled through 14-hour workdays attempting to master the skills that would be matters of life and death on our next assignment. Since casualties were so high among our graduates, our own hectic training schedule was largely dictated by the staggering attrition rate among the young lieutenants already in Vietnam, whom we were being groomed to replace, and whom we groused at the frantic pace we recognized its necessity. So that's pretty ominous. You're just getting pushed through this training because they need you on the battlefield because casualty rates are so high. Over and over again, our instructors reminded us that the road to hell was paved with the bones of young lieutenants who had made mistakes. And while their admonitions were perhaps unnecessary, they were keenly effective as attention getters. The Tet Offensive had begun, and the ancient citadel of the city of Wei fell into communist hands, with the attendant massacre of thousands of innocent citizens. The magnitude of what we had signed on for registered ominously to my classmates. My fellow Marines responded to it in different ways. Some saw the stepped-up pace of war as a challenge, and in their youthful exuberance welcomed the chance to prove themselves worthy of the uniform. Others surveyed the situation with an eye toward the number of junior officers being killed or wounded each week and began scrambling for military occupational specialties that offered insulation from combat. I began to notice for the first time the graffiti that had been carved into classroom desktops by anonymous students from earlier classes. "Why die? Go supply," one admonished, while another advised, "Motor T and out in 3. A third put it simply, "What the fuck? Drive a truck." The opposite viewpoint was made by some gung-ho student who wrote for the more bloodthirsty of us, "War is our business, and business is good." So you remember what book we read where the guy's like, you have to put down your 3 selections that you want to do in the Marine Corps, and the guy puts
the thing,
yeah. Infantry platoon commander, infantry platoon commander, and infantry platoon commander. Here are these guys, now Vietnam's going on, they're like, you know what, I want to be in the motor transport, meaning working on trucks, or I want to be in supply. So you have a different attitude that's already starting to creep up. Somewhat ironically, as our concern over the military occupational specialties into which we could be channeled grew with the rising casualty toll, our options became more and more limited until, for some classes at the height of the war, they were non-existent. The Marine Corps had a duty to field combat officers, and if that duty required that every officer in a basic school class become an 03 infantry officer, that is precisely what would happen. That's crazy to think about. But your whole class, like we need you all to be infantry officers. That's what's good. That's where you're going. I had joined the Marine Corps with the intention of becoming a combat platoon leader, and nothing that happened during Tet in any way altered my determination. I could not have faced my father or lived with myself if I had chosen an easier way. For me, therefore, there was no moral dilemma or soul-searching agony when it came time to list my preferences. My choice of specialization was infantry, my choice of duty was Vietnam, and the Marine Corps was more than happy to oblige me. You know, it's even though he talks about in the book, and it's always hard to pick out what parts I'm going to cover and what parts I'm going to skip through. Even though he kind of he talks about how, being in the Marines was his thing. He definitely, when he was going to college and his senior years in high school, he wasn't really thinking about it. So it wasn't until he was graduating from college, it was a pretty quick decision that he made. He went from like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do, to like, okay, I'm joining the Marine Corps. Yeah. I think the answer revealed itself to him, but it wasn't something that he was thinking about all the time. Right. He wasn't, and he talks about him not being athletic, and he's wearing glasses and he's got braces. He's definitely not your stereotypical gung-ho guy.
Yeah.
That's my point. He's not your stereotypical gung-ho guy. He's just not. And yet he's following the footsteps of his father, and that's what he decides to do. So